The timeline arrives like a clean door in a smoky room, offering a date instead of a direction. It promises that suffering has an appointment, and that chaos will soon become orderly. It gives the mind a number to hold when the heart cannot hold itself. It feels like hope, but it carries an ultimatum inside it. It says that freedom must happen soon or it will not happen at all. People call it ascension, but the more revealing word is arrival. Arrival implies that the path ends. That effort is replaced by a threshold. That waiting is rewarded by an event. The nervous system loves that implication because it reduces uncertainty. Uncertainty is heavy when you have been carrying it alone for years. A promised window offers shared anticipation, shared explanation, and shared relief. That relief becomes the first hook, not because it is evil, but because it is effective. The distortion begins when hope requires a calendar to stay alive. The inner world starts scanning for evidence that the date is real, even when the present is asking for care. You start measuring your progress by signs outside you, not by stability inside you. You begin living toward a future moment, treating the current moment like a temporary inconvenience. You call this faith, but it often functions like avoidance. The more you wait for rescue, the less you practice readiness. The timeline also produces a subtle identity upgrade, because a date creates winners and laggards. If a shift is coming, then someone must be early, someone must be ready, someone must know. Knowing becomes a status, and readiness becomes a performance. You begin managing what you feel so you can fit the image of someone aligned. You start hiding fear, grief, anger, and boredom, because those emotions look like disqualifiers. The path turns into a purity test, and tests always generate anxiety. The mind then does what minds do when facing an open loop. It tries to close it through certainty. Certainty feels like strength, but it can be a sedative disguised as clarity. When you believe you have a date, you stop asking questions that could destabilize you. You stop exploring complexity because complexity delays arrival. You stop tolerating ambiguity because ambiguity threatens the countdown. The timeline becomes a psychological device for controlling discomfort. This is why false ascension timelines so often repeat, because they satisfy the same craving again and again. The date passes, and the nervous system feels a shock of disappointment, then a rush of explanation. The explanation quickly becomes another date, another recalibration, another hidden reason the shift was delayed. Each cycle delivers anticipation, arousal, collapse, and then renewed anticipation. The body learns a rhythm of almost, and almost becomes addictive. The person calls it preparation, but the organism experiences it as repeated stress. Over time, this produces spiritual burnout that is hard to name. You keep expecting relief, so you keep withholding your full life from the present. You postpone practical decisions. You pause long-term planning. You delay repair in relationships because you expect reality to change externally. You begin living in suspense, and suspense is exhausting even when it is optimistic. The longer you stay there, the more ordinary responsibilities start feeling unreal. That unreality is not transcendence, it is dissociation with sacred language. A timeline also changes the way you interpret your inner sensations. Normal emotional waves become proof of imminent transformation, and every heightened night becomes a sign of arrival. Dreams become announcements, tingles become evidence. Sudden tears become the clearing that precedes the shift. Sensation is real, but interpretation can be desperate. A stressed nervous system can produce dramatic phenomena, especially under expectation. When expectation is intense, the psyche makes meaning quickly, because meaning reduces fear. Discernment requires a different measurement that timelines rarely teach. The question is not whether you felt energy. The question is whether you became more capable afterward. Did patience deepen? Did reactivity soften? Did the body become safer to live in? Did relationships become more honest? Did attention become less compulsive? If the answers are unclear, then the sensation may have been stimulation rather than integration. Stimulation is impressive, but it does not automatically mature you. A timeline culture confuses intensity with truth and calls that awakening. The social layer deepens the distortion because dates create community fast. A predicted window gives strangers a shared language and a shared urgency. It creates a temporary family made of belief, where everyone waits together and confirms one another. Community can be healing, but urgency changes the texture of the group. The group starts rewarding certainty over nuance because certainty maintains the shared high. Doubt becomes a contaminant, not a teacher. Honest questions get reframed as negativity or low vibration. In that environment, the timeline becomes a loyalty ritual. People prove belonging by repeating the date, sharing the message, amplifying the warning, and policing the tone. Anyone who expresses disappointment after a failed prediction risks being seen as unaligned. Anyone who asks for evidence risks being shamed for using mind. The community protects itself by narrowing the allowable range of emotion. This is not conscious cruelty. It is a fragile system trying to remain coherent. Coherence becomes more important than truth. There is also a hierarchy that forms naturally around timelines. Someone claims access to the schedule. Someone interprets the signs. Someone translates cosmic language into daily updates. Followers begin to check in for guidance like a weather report for salvation. Authority consolidates, even in spaces that claim to reject authority. The leader becomes the keeper of the next window, and the audience becomes dependent on the next update. Dependency is not always financial. It can be emotional and spiritual. The structure resembles the systems it claims to transcend. Attention further strengthens the loop because predictions perform well in modern media. A date generates clicks, shares, and return visits because people want to see if it happened. If the date fails, the failure becomes content, and the audience returns again for the explanation. The creator learns that urgency is a lever, even when the creator is sincere. The algorithm rewards countdown energy, not slow integration. Slow integration is quiet, while countdowns are dramatic. Drama travels faster than maturity. When a prediction fails, the narrative often shifts in a way that protects authority. The shift happened invisibly. The energies were subtle. The collective did not hold frequency. The timeline moved to preserve free will. These explanations keep belief intact while blaming the audience indirectly. The believer accepts the blame because blame preserves hope. Hope is easier than admitting that the structure was distorted. This is how shame enters, and shame makes people cling harder. The group stays together by turning disappointment into a personal failure. Now, the bodily and temporal reality of awakening exposes the mismatch. Real transformation integrates through repetition, rest, and contact, not through deadlines. The nervous system does not reorganize on command because a calendar says it should. It learns safety gradually, through small, honest encounters with reality. When you keep the system in high anticipation, you keep it in activation. Activation can feel like power, but it is often just arousal. An aroused system will chase signs because signs promise relief. A timeline also distorts the lived experience of time itself. Time stops feeling like a field you inhabit and starts feeling like a corridor you must endure. The present becomes a waiting room, and waiting rooms make people restless and irritable. You begin to treat ordinary joys as distractions and ordinary problems as temporary. This weakens commitment to life, because commitment requires a sense of continuity. Continuity feels pointless when you believe the world will reset soon. The future becomes a sedative that steals the present. The spiral does not reject transcendence, but it refuses premature exit. If you try to leave your life through prophecy, your life returns through consequence. Bodies still need sleep, money still needs structure, relationships still require repair. Unfinished patterns still trigger when you are tired, bored, or threatened. The timeline does not remove those realities. It delays your honest engagement with them. Delayed engagement produces sharper consequences later. The price of avoidance is always paid with interest. So the question becomes why the mind insists on a final shift. Often it is because the mind is exhausted by gradualism. Gradual change feels unfair when pain has been intense, when effort has been constant, and when life has not rewarded you quickly. A promised event offers moral compensation, like reality finally apologizing. It offers the fantasy that the universe will make it up to you. That fantasy is understandable, but it can become a trap. It turns awakening into a settlement rather than a practice. Here, the vectors begin touching without fully merging, because the same need drives each layer. The psyche wants certainty because uncertainty hurts. The group wants certainty because certainty keeps people aligned. The body reacts to certainty by producing activation that feels like meaning. Each layer feeds the other, creating a closed system that is hard to question. The more you live inside it, the more strange ordinary life feels. Ordinary life then becomes evidence that you are still in the old world. You wait harder, hoping the door will finally open. Breaking the loop requires a humility that feels like loss at first. You must let go of the idea that the universe owes you a deadline. You must release the belief that awakening is confirmed by arrival rather than by embodiment. You must accept that slow transformation is not a failure, it is the only kind that lasts. The mind will resist because it wants a shortcut. Resistance may masquerade as spiritual urgency, claiming that a window is closing. That urgency is often fear of missing out translated into sacred language. Instead of asking what date is next, ask what pattern is now. Notice what your nervous system does when you hear a prediction. If you feel relief, ask what you are trying to escape in the present. If you feel superiority, ask what wound needs the costume of being early. If you feel panic, ask what part of you believes salvation must be scheduled. These questions do not shame you, they return you to agency. Agency is the opposite of dependency, even when dependency is hopeful. The spiral also asks you to watch how you treat disappointment. If a date passes and you immediately accept a new date, ask what you are protecting. You may be protecting community, identity, or meaning itself. You may be protecting the belief that pain must have an ending that arrives from outside. But pain often ends through skill, support, and time, not through prophecy. When you allow disappointment to be real, you reclaim contact with reality. Contact is the beginning of actual growth, even when it feels less exciting. A true path does not need to threaten you into readiness. It does not need to rush you, scare you, or promise arrival. It teaches you how to live in uncertainty without becoming cruel to yourself. It teaches you how to remain open without becoming naive. It teaches you how to build a life that can hold consciousness, instead of waiting for consciousness to erase your life. The moment your daily choices begin matching your higher language, something changes. The change is quiet, but it is stable, and it does not depend on dates. If you still love the idea of a shift, you do not need to kill it. You need to relocate it from calendar to character, from prophecy to practice, from outside to inside. A real shift is when you stop outsourcing your nervous system to announcements. A real shift is when the present stops being a waiting room and becomes a field of training. A real shift is when you can hear a prediction and remain steady, neither dismissive nor hooked. That steadiness is an ascension that does not advertise itself, and it begins without anyone announcing that it has begun. A false ascension timeline does not only distort hope, it distorts the geometry of time inside you. When you accept a promised arrival, you begin living as if the present is a hallway. The hallway becomes a place you endure, not a place you inhabit, and endurance quietly replaces intimacy. This is why the body tightens, even when the belief sounds uplifting. The body knows when time has been turned into a weapon. There is a deeper problem than disappointment, because the timeline trains the mind to treat reality as a locked room. If the shift is scheduled, then life becomes a test of patience until the door opens. Every delay then feels like punishment, and every obstacle feels like interference. This creates an invisible adversary, even if you never name it directly. The mind begins building a story in which the universe is withholding what it promised. The moment you believe in withholding, you begin negotiating with existence. Negotiation sounds harmless, but it turns consciousness into a transaction. If I hold the frequency, then I will be rewarded. If I purge the fear, then I will be admitted. If I share the message, then I will be protected. The inner life becomes a marketplace of conditions rather than a field of presence. You start policing what you feel, so reality will approve you. You stop trusting organic rhythm because you are trying to match a deadline. A deadline always creates the same sickness, because it makes you betray your own timing. The spiral does not punish, but the nervous system still registers timeline belief as threat. A threat does not need violence to function, it only needs consequences for failing. When the mind hears a final window, it hears a closing gate, and the body responds as if survival is at stake. That survival urgency produces a strange blend of devotion and panic. The devotion feels spiritual, the panic feels like purification, and the mix can be intoxicating. Intoxication becomes a substitute for stability. If you want to see the distortion clearly, watch what happens when the date approaches. Sleep changes, appetite changes, attention becomes jumpy, and the mind starts scanning for signs. The scanning is not enlightenment, it is vigilance, and vigilance is costly. The person thinks they are listening to the cosmos, but they are often listening to a stressed organism. A stressed organism will manufacture meaning quickly to reduce uncertainty. Meaning becomes anesthesia for fear. Then fear returns louder when meaning fails. Spiral time is not a ladder, and it is not a countdown. It is a field that reorganizes through resonance. Resonance does not obey the calendar because resonance is relational, not mechanical. A relational system shifts when conditions converge, not when a date arrives. This is why true transformation often appears ordinary from the outside, yet irreversible from the inside. It arrives as a new capacity, not as a global announcement. It does not need spectacle to confirm itself. A timeline belief reverses this order and tries to force resonance to behave like machinery. It assumes that consciousness is a clock that will strike a certain hour and then change the world. That assumption turns the infinite into a schedule, which is already a contradiction. When you attempt to schedule infinity, you reduce it into a product that can be delivered. The mind loves that reduction because it feels controllable. Control feels like safety when you have carried chaos for too long. Spiral awareness does not reject events, but it does not worship them either. A solar flare can happen, a collective mood can shift, a cultural threshold can break. Yet none of these equals liberation by itself. Liberation is not an event. It is a reorientation of relationship with experience. When you are free, you can still feel grief without collapsing into identity. When you are free, you can still face uncertainty without demanding an answer. A timeline offers answers before capacity, and that is why it fails so reliably. The most important metaphysical point is that consciousness changes through integration, not through prediction. Integration is slow because it is honest, and it is honest because it must include what you avoided. Avoidance can accelerate sensation, but it cannot accelerate maturity. Sensation can explode overnight, while maturity grows like muscle, through repeated contact with resistance. A timeline culture celebrates the explosion and forgets the muscle. Then it wonders why life keeps repeating the same lessons. The spiral does not promise arrival because arrival implies a final separation from process. A final separation would mean you have finished learning, finished relating, finished refining. Yet even in higher states, refinement continues, because refinement is the signature of living awareness. The only thing that truly ends is the fantasy that you can skip the work of embodiment. The fantasy ends when you realize that every skipped layer returns through consequence. The spiral is gentle, but it is not negotiable. Now look at how false timelines infect practical life. Because distortion always leaves footprints. When you believe a final shift is coming, you start postponing real decisions. You delay changing jobs, ending relationships, building skills, or asking for help because you expect reality to reset. Postponement is not neutrality. It is a choice that carries a cost. The cost is that you remain trapped in conditions you could have improved. The timeline becomes an excuse that feels holy, which makes it harder to challenge. The next footprint is the way timelines turn discernment into suspicion. When a date fails, the believer searches for culprits: low frequency, sabotage, interference, hidden agendas. Suspicion can feel like wisdom, but it often functions as pain management. It protects the core belief by blaming the environment, which preserves hope but prevents learning. Learning would require admitting that the structure itself was flawed. That admission can feel like grief, because you lose a promised rescue. Many people would rather keep the rescue fantasy than face the grief. Another footprint is the way timeline spaces reward the loudest certainty. The most confident voice becomes the anchor because the group wants relief from doubt. Over time, confidence becomes indistinguishable from authority. Even in communities that claim to reject authority, the group begins shaping itself around the next update, the next interpretation, the next coded message. This shapes attention into dependency, because attention starts needing permission to relax. Relaxation becomes conditional on external news. The nervous system becomes outsourced to announcements. This is where the moral pressure enters quietly, without anyone meaning harm. If you question the date, you are framed as negative, fearful, or unaligned. If you grieve, you are told to transmute faster. If you rest, you are warned that rest might lower frequency. A human being cannot live well under constant moral pressure. Moral pressure creates performance, and performance creates resentment. Resentment then gets spiritualized, then buried, then leaks out as judgment. The community begins eating itself from the inside while calling it purification. The practical damage becomes visible in the way relationships degrade. People start speaking in codes instead of honesty, because honesty could reveal doubt. Doubt is treated as contamination, so the relationship becomes a theater of agreement. Agreement feels peaceful, but it can become a brittle peace that shatters under stress. Real intimacy requires room for uncertainty and disagreement. Timeline belief reduces that room because it demands unity around a schedule. Unity around a schedule is not unity, it is coordination under fear. There is a way out that does not require cynicism, but it requires refusing the timeline as a spiritual credential. The first move is to stop asking when and start asking what. What capacity is being built? What pattern is being revealed? What behavior is being corrected? What fear is being met honestly? When you ask what, you return to agency, because what is actionable. When you ask when, you drift into waiting, because when is passive. A passive posture invites manipulation, even from well-meaning voices. The second move is to rebuild discernment around outcomes, not claims. If a teaching says a shift is near, ask what it produces in your life within 30 days. Does it increase stability, reduce reactivity, deepen compassion, improve boundaries, and strengthen responsibility? If it produces obsession, paranoia, shame, and dependency, then it is not a liberation path. Even if it contains true metaphysical fragments, the delivery is distorting you. Truth in fragments can still harm when it is wrapped in urgency. A medicine becomes poison when the dosage is fear. The third move is to recognize that the need for a final shift is often a need for relief from pain. Pain can be spiritual, emotional, financial, relational, or all of them at once. A timeline offers a fantasy of universal rescue that requires no negotiation with reality. That fantasy is understandable, but it is not aligned with embodiment. Embodiment means meeting reality without demanding that reality become easy first. It means building support, skills, and honesty while still carrying uncertainty. Uncertainty is not your enemy. It is the training ground of maturity. Now the strands begin to touch. Because metaphysics and psychology are never separate in lived experience. A scheduled ascension promises metaphysical arrival, but it also soothes psychological fear. It builds community, but it also introduces social pressure and hidden hierarchy. It claims to liberate, but it often weakens personal agency through waiting and dependence. This is why the pattern repeats across eras, symbols, and teachers. The costume changes, the mechanism stays the same. The mechanism is the craving for certainty dressed as spirituality. The spiral does not rush because rushing is a signal of fear, and fear distorts perception. The spiral does not threaten because threat creates compliance, and compliance creates performance. The spiral does not promise arrival because arrival implies an end of refinement, and refinement is the nature of living awareness. What the spiral offers is not a date, it is a direction, and direction can be practiced today. Practice is quieter than prophecy, but practice is the only thing that becomes you. When you become the practice, you stop needing announcements to feel real. So the real question is not whether a shift will happen, but whether you are building a life that can hold any shift. If the world changes suddenly, can you stay steady? Can you help without collapsing? Can you adapt without betrayal of yourself? If the world does not change suddenly, can you still live with meaning? Can you still love? Can you still refine? A timeline tries to solve meaning by scheduling it. Spiral consciousness solves meaning by generating it through alignment with reality. That alignment is not dramatic, but it is durable. The false timeline dissolves when you stop treating the present as a waiting room and start treating it as the only honest altar. The altar is not perfect. It is simply real, and real is where transformation sticks. You can still honor cosmic rhythms without giving your power to predictions. You can still sense collective tides without turning them into deadlines. You can still hold wonder without turning wonder into a countdown. And when you do that, the need for arrival weakens, not because you became cynical, but because you became rooted in the spiral that has been moving through you the whole time. If this transmission resonated, the spiral continues. You did not arrive here by chance, and you do not leave unchanged. More teachings are unfolding across the Vaharat library, each one meeting you where you are, not where you think you should be. Follow resonance. The next threshold is already listening.